Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm bringing today another benchmark video. I'm running on my Razer Blade laptop. If you're not familiar with my setup with my laptop, I've done two other benchmark videos. I've done one for Fallout 4 and then also Star Wars Battlefront. I get a little more in depth on my actual hardware in those videos, so if you want to check them out, I'll put a link in the description and probably a little button on the screen now. But this benchmark video, I'm actually going over the Ubisoft's new game, Rainbow Six Siege. I have a video where I actually talk about my first impressions of the video and of the video game and what I think about the games thus far of playing it the first week or so. So if you want to check that out, I'll put that also in the description. But that's not the focus of the video today. Today's video is just how does this game run on, you could probably classify as medium hardware. So you're not getting top of the line, it's not bottom shelf, but it's a hardware that should run most games. And how well does it run on? I'm doing 10 tests today actually, so low, medium, high, very high, and ultra settings on both 720p resolution and 1080p resolution. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started with the actual benchmark testings with the 720p at the resolution at low graphical settings overall. So starting with that, you can see here when you set up the graphics, it actually has, I'm using about a little less than a third of my video memory that my computer has. And I mean, looking at the gameplay, it's low quality graphics, but it's still a very pretty game. It's 2015, but we're getting well above 100 frames per second in the hallway back there. And then when you're coming in with more geometry into this room with multiple enemies and lots of things happening, you're still getting 80, 90, 100 FPS. So it's really good frames per second for what you'd expect for such low graphics. Moving on to medium. For 720p, I'm using just slightly more RAM out of my 3 gigs available for my mobile graphics chip. Again, I'm well above 100 frames per second. This thing is beast running this game. We're only at 720p resolution, so it's not optimal high definition, and we're only at medium quality settings, so it's 2/5 of the max settings that you can get. But the game's still running very smooth, very buttery, over 100 frames per second, like I said, so you're not noticing any dip in frames or any lag whatsoever. And then I believe next we should be moving on to high settings for 720p. You can see from medium to high, we about doubled the amount of usage of our video memory that we have. So it's going from about 1,000 megabytes to 2,000 out of the 3,000 megabytes available. But I'm getting 90 to 100 frames per second, so well 60 plus. Which for me, if I'm getting 60 frames, I'm happy. Your eye can't physically detect much more than that anyway, so as long as you're getting above 60, that's what is good. And the settings are high, so you're getting the very nice graphics and well above 100 frames. And then moving on from high settings, we're going to be looking at the very high settings for 720p. Not as much of a difference from medium to high. We're looking at about 2,400 megabytes of video memory versus 3,000 for the max. And then when you're running high, it was about 2,000. So only about a 400 megabyte difference. And then you're not getting that 120 FPS anymore when you're running very high on 720p, but you're still getting 80, 90. I think it does dip right to about 100 right there. And so you're getting very high graphical quality settings. You're not getting 1080p, but the frames are well above normal of what you would see out of something like an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 3. Moving on to ultra settings, we don't even hit the max peak of video RAM for ultra, so going into this, I knew that the results were going to be pretty good, and I was right. You're not getting below 60 frames at all on 720p resolution. That's essentially what my tests are showing is if you're running the game on this laptop, it has a 14-inch screen, and I like playing on 720p if the screen is that small because the objects are a little blown up and you can see them a little bit better for someone whose eyes aren't as good as other people's. Like I need glasses while I play. So you're getting this really beautiful game, ultra graphics settings, and you're getting above 60 frames per second the entire time. So definitely a win. Moving on from there, we have low settings 1080p. So this is where right under 1,000 megabytes of video RAM out of the 3,000 for low. So you know the 1080p, 720p to 1080p, that's actually going to be a pretty large stretch for this game. But at least running low graphics quality overall, you're not going to really dip under 60 that I saw. I'm getting above 60 this entire gameplay. And it's still running buttery smooth. Like I said, since you're above that 60 frames per second mark, you're not seeing any real lag, but you're not getting as high of a graphical settings as we were prior. But you are getting that 1080p HD quality, so if that's important to you, that's something to remember. Moving on to medium settings for 1080p, this is where we're at, I believe, about 1,300 out of 3,000. So not that much of a big difference between low and medium, and you are going to be getting that much better graphical setting from low to medium. Obviously, it's higher. Spoiler alert. But so this is where the first time you see the dip a little under 60, you're generally getting about, I think it got to about 40 at some point, but I was also cloistered around a lot of enemies, and I was in really tight hallways, so there's a lot of geometry. So that could explain when it got closer to 40. When I was in a much more open space, it stuck around 60. So I would say medium is around 40 to 60 plus FPS. But you don't feel the lag when it's at that 40 FPS. So that's a good thing about this game. It feels smooth even when it gets that lower. So high settings, 1080p, we're looking at 2300 out of 3000. That was a much bigger jump from medium to high, which is what we saw at 720p. I kind of expected it. For high, I'm still not getting much lower than 40 frames per second. It might be the maps. I am indoors. I would suspect that I would go lower than 40 since I'm indoors most of the time in this gameplay, but it's really sticking to that about 40 frames per second to somewhere around 55. So you're not really getting above 60 anymore at this point, but you're also running 1080p HD display graphics, and you're running at high graphical quality. So the game is still really pretty, and you're running 1080p, so everything's a lot sharper. And then even though you are dipping to about 40 frames per second at some points, it's still really smooth, really buttery, and honestly, when some games, when it dips below 60, you really feel that lag, but I didn't feel it with Siege, in my opinion. So it is going under that 60, but I couldn't really tell. The thing that I think you really need to look out for at this point on is the heat that your laptop is giving out. From here on, it's when the fans are really blowing, your laptop's getting really hot, and I don't know if it's built for playing at this level sustainability-wise. And then going to very high, so this is the first time we're seeing our graphics card in the orange, so we're at 2600 out of 3000 megabytes. It's getting really to that point of high threshold in terms of graphical intensity. But I was, again, didn't really dip much below 40. I was getting about 40 to 50 frames per second. This game, even though I'm testing my memory card at this point, and my computer's running high and hot, it really stands up to the test of not pushing me that far under 40 frames, and it still feels smooth even when it was at 38, 42 frames per second. So I was very impressed. And then moving on to ultra graphics, we're at 2672 out of 3000. This is the highest setting, 1080p ultra graphics. This is the best that this laptop can, or that this game can give out, and this laptop can handle it. You're still looking at 40 to 50 frames per second. That's really not that bad compared to some of the other games that I've tested thus far. But like I said previously, your laptop's gonna be running really hot. Your fans are gonna be blowing, and it could cause damage if you end up playing like this too long. So, in summary, I play 720p. On most games, just like I said, I enjoy that better for this 14-inch screen, but 1080p works. I like another point for 720p resolution is no matter which graphical setting you're going to be at, you're getting well above 60 frames per second, even on ultra. So you can get those ultra graphics at 720p resolution, and it still runs very smooth. You can say the same thing about 1080p resolution. At low, you're getting well above 60. I wouldn't run that. You could really run this game at any setting at the full HD 1080p, but your laptop's is gonna get hot. It's gonna be running real high. It could cause damage to your laptop for long periods of time. So I wouldn't recommend it. My opinion, if you really want those ultra graphics, run it on 720p. Be getting well above 60 frames per second the entire time. It's not gonna be as hot or as loud for your laptop, and you're just overall, in my opinion, you're gonna have a better experience. But I hope this video showed that the Razer Blade 2014 can run any graphical setting at both 720p and 1080p. I hope this video helped. People have seemed to like my benchmark videos in the past, so please write in the comments if there's some games that you want me to do these similar video types on. I think the next one I'm going to do is going to be Counter-Strike Global Offensive. That game can be run on majority of systems, but I want to see how high the frames can go for this laptop specifically, because in a game like CSGO, every frame matters. So anyways, guys, thanks for checking out this video. Hope it helped. I hope your day is beer and Skittles, and as always, thanks for tuning in.